All right, so thank you. My name is Russell Bowles. I'm with KDADS. I've been overseeing the desk review section of the final rule assessments. And so we'll talk about ensuring autonomy for HCBS participants today. And so the first thing we want to talk about is the letter of the rule, so everybody is familiar. Home and community-based settings must have all of the following qualities and such other qualities as the Secretary determines to be appropriate, which shall be based on the needs of the individual as indicated in a person-centered service plan. And those qualities of the setting should optimize but not regiment individual initiative, autonomy, and independence in making life choices, including but not limited to daily activities, physical environment, and with whom to interact. We wanted to make sure and include this because this comes directly from the final rule regulation. And it does specifically talk about autonomy, and that's one of the things that we are decided to cover. So, in order to be compliant with the final rule, your agency needs to provide full autonomy to persons served within the bounds of their person-centered service plan, which we'll call PCSPs from here forward, as defined by the final rule. So what does that also mean? Any modifications or restrictions to autonomy must be documented in an individual's PCSP and not restrict the autonomy of other persons served who do not have the restriction, modification in their PCSP. So in other words, the restrictions only should only apply to the one individual they need to. Everybody else needs to remain and keep the autonomy that they currently have. So person-centered service plan. The relationships between PCSPs and final rule compliance are that final rule is meant to describe how a provider manages a setting to show how it offers autonomy and any other characteristics requirements of the final rule. The person served at a comparable level to those not receiving services. So with that, PCSPs are to be tailored documents for persons served. So the PCSPs are focused on the person served, not particularly on the setting, right? Which reflects the needs of the individual. PCSPs may modify, but not invalidate the setting policy. If there are any restrictions due to a specific assessed need that would limit or invalidate final rule compliance, this should be reflected in the PCSP and not directly modify the policy of the setting. So with that, what we're saying in that long sentence there is that your PCSP is not your policy, and it shouldn't modify the policy for the entire setting. It should be directed specifically towards the individual that it is designed to be in place for. So next, we're going to talk about some questions. These are some, but not all of the questions that were in the assessment related to autonomy. If you are a non-residential provider, you may not have seen quite a few of these, so they are there. And you will notice that some of them are just kind of straightforward questions. So the access to facilities. Under the HCBS settings final rule, providers are required to offer participants access to the following areas. Right? The kitchen, a separate meal prep area, a microwave and refrigerator, a dining area, laundry, and common areas, such as but not limited to the living room or other places to gather and socialize. All right? So if they have full access to the kitchen, and it's large enough that they can have multiple places to help prepare food that would also fall into that separate meal prep area. So some things to look at that way. They need to have access to laundry. So if there's a laundry facility in your facility, they should have access to that. If not, they should have the same access as anybody who does not require those services. Compliance. So we look at basically three things. We look at policies, handbooks and other documents, and then pictures. And this is what a policy should be. It should state clearly how persons served have access to these areas. Handbooks or other documents should inform persons served, guardians, staff, and volunteers what areas persons served have access to when they receive services at a setting. Pictures or photographs, and a note to that is only having pictures of these areas do not show that people have access, but they can support strong policies, handbooks, and other documents. So what we mean by that, and I think we're going to cover that in a little bit more in detail here shortly. Keep in mind right now, these are focused on autonomy. Moving forward. HCBS providers are required to ensure access for everyone who does not have a modification in their PCSP by making sure there are no barriers preventing people from accessing these areas. Accommodations to help people access to the same degree of people not receiving services. And physical accessibility. Now, when we talk about physical accessibility and barriers, those are for the residents you have at your location. So if you've got stairs and you don't have anybody that is not ambulatory, for example, if you don't have anybody in a wheelchair, if your residents can go up and down the stairs, they have access. I want to make sure that's clear so that people aren't thinking that they need to be accessible to everybody. It's based on the residents at your location. So policies should show how the organization provides support for people with disabilities to access these areas, as we talked earlier. So in your policies, they should be written to show how all individuals have access. Then your PCSPs can limit those accesses to specific individuals and show how that's done. Pictures show that there are no barriers to that access, show accommodations that are in place to help people access these areas, and they can help to support policies. So for the most part, pictures on their own does not show that people have access to the areas, but it does show that access exists for them, the physical aspects of that. So what is meant by full access? HCBS participants should have full access. This means they do not require permission from staff or have to ask staff for help to access areas. Again, this is if they do need to ask for help or they do need some additional assistance, that should be specified in their PCSP and not in policy. So full access should allow them to have the same access that anybody not receiving services has. So providers are required to ensure persons served have the choice and opportunities to set their own schedule and use these areas at their choosing. Right? So they get to choose when they use their areas, just like anybody who doesn't require services. So again, a policy should clearly show that persons served have access to all areas of the setting and do not require permission or help to access and have the ability to set their own schedule. Staff and volunteer training should show that staff and volunteers understand persons served have full access to these areas and do not need permission to access the areas. Handbooks or other documents should show how persons served are notified that they can get accommodations to access areas, are able to set their own schedule, etc. Question F2. We brought this up specifically because it tends to be a tough question to answer. The question says, does this site provide anyone besides the person served and appropriate staff with a key or way to be buzzed in for entering the facility? All right, first, I kind of want to talk about what buzzed in means. With technology moving forward, buzzed in could be you have a access card that would take the place of a key. You can push a button and someone allows you to enter by unlocking the door from a different location. So those are the things that are meant by that. All right. Does this site provide anyone with a key? Again, take a look at besides the person served and appropriate staff, and you need to identify exactly what appropriate staff is. So if they work there, then they're probably going to need a key to the facility. All right. Maintenance men and individuals like that. Does this site provide anyone with a way to be buzzed in for entering the facility? Again, like I was talking about, it could be as simple as a access card, or for those people who sometimes see the larger cities, you see the nice little where you push the button and it buzzes up in the apartment or in the where the individual is, and they have the ability to unlock the door to let you in from there. All right, to be compliant, a provider must ensure person served or appointed party is allowed entrance at the discretion of the person served. This can be accomplished a number of ways, and that's by providing keys to the person served deems appropriate. Have a process for buzzing people in, such as a doorbell, a lock release that the individual can push when they need to. But the point here is to provide person served autonomy to choose to let people in or not. So they get to choose who they want in their facility. Putting it all together. Including everything you need in policies, handbooks, etc. So in other words, a common theme, when you do policies, handbooks, make sure that you've got the information that you need in there. Policies should include dates, branding, page numbers, and the purpose at a minimum. So what that's talking about is when you see a policy, you should see the branding. The branding means, who does this policy belong to? Company ABC. Page numbers are very helpful because they let us know how many pages are in this policy. So if we make sure that we're not missing any pages or we're not missing a portion of the policy when it's being looked at. Discuss the purpose of the policy. So it should be right on there. This is a policy on autonomy, client rights, resident accessibility, something along that lines. It tells us what the purpose of the policy is. And then very important to include dates. It lets us know that we're looking at the most current copy of the policy, right? And that we should be able to see all evidence in its complete version. So if you want to, I know we've asked in the past as evidence that you take a targeted piece of your policy and turn that in. What we really need to look at is we need to look at the whole policy, and then you can provide us a targeted piece so that we can say, okay, this is from there or that. So that's one of the things we have really come to find